This is episode 69 of Changing the Face of Yoga. And I'm talking to Missy Hoffman about her classes for men and how men feel discriminated against in classes by those that are already in the class or other men. It's quite an interesting topic, and I haven't had anything like that on the podcast before. So I think this will give you some really good information. I also have an opportunity for you. Harsha Yoga is offering an online course to teach you or expand your knowledge in the area of accessible yoga for pregnant women. And it is available now, and you can sign up at http://bit.ly/Harsha, and that's HERSHA, all caps. And if you put in this code when you are paying for the course, you will receive 15% off. So the code is CFOYHERSHA. Again, all caps. So that may be an opportunity for those of you that want to learn or to expand your knowledge about providing accessible yoga for pregnant women. So let's listen to Missy. Hello, and welcome to Change the Face of Yoga, teaching toddlers through golden oldies. I'm very excited to be talking to lots of yoga teachers who will explain their passion for teaching yoga to students with different ages, physical fitness levels, wellness levels, and different goals. They will explain the benefits of yoga for these students and will be including teacher tips and pose modifications. I am Stephanie Cunningham of Yoga Lightness, and I've been teaching over 50s for 10 years. So this area is my passion and the passion of many other yoga teachers that you will be listening to in this series. Thank you so much for listening, and let's get started. This is Stephanie Cunningham with Changing the Face of Yoga, and my great guest today is Missy Hoffman of Missy Kai Yoga. And Missy is a yoga therapist, and what we're going to talk about today is that she has quite a few men who are in her yoga classes and in her yoga therapist group. And we want to talk about the differences that she may have encountered because of working with men and how to get them interested in yoga and yoga therapy. She is very interested in improving her client and students' lives through functional movement principles. And she's been helping them to improve mobility, relieve pain, and reduce stress. She used to be a public and corporate accountant, and she left that to do yoga. And she gives private lessons, workshops, international retreats. And when she was an accountant, she worked in startups as well as corporate business. So she incorporates yoga therapy, yoga nidra, energy work, acro yoga, and Ayurveda into her own practice. So welcome, Missy. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that introduction?
Hi, Stephanie. Thank you so much for having me on today. I am really excited to dive right into this topic as well. And yes, there's actually more to add to that list now. So some of what we're going to talk about today will involve the area of touch and the importance of touch and intimacy for this particular population as well, and the benefits that yoga can provide. So I'm also currently taking a massage therapy training as well to blend that in with all of the other therapeutic and rehabilitative work that I do. So I'm
okay,
excited about it.
We'll be sure to cover that too. So that's great. You had something, I believe it was on your Facebook page, of a man who was doing yoga in a park. And although I didn't listen to the video because I was pretty sure I could understand what was going to happen, was another man walked by and made some rather disparaging remarks, especially about how that wasn't a very masculine thing to do. So I never thought about that before. Is yoga considered not very masculine and something that guys may be a little leery of?
In short, yes. In short, yes. If you want the honest answer, I think this is not brought to a lot of awareness in the yoga community and perhaps the way that it deserves to be. And I'll just address a lot of the pushback that I get from some of my commenters on social media right away, which is that we are all one, yoga is union and non-separation. If you're going to teach yoga, just teach yoga and don't worry about the gender of the person. I hear that point and I feel where you're coming from, but I'm just going to address that right up front and say that the whole premise of the field of yoga therapy is that we adapt the practice to the person. And if that's true, we have to recognize that men and women have fundamentally different needs from the practice. And that's not just based on their gender, but the certain conditioning and societal roles that we play and the physical needs of and emotional needs of those different types of practitioners. And so, to be honest, that Facebook video did not surprise me at all, but from my research and my clinical experience and everything, it's not surprising to me that something like that would happen. From a study that I conducted with respondents all over the world of all different backgrounds and experience levels with yoga, over 80% of the men polled said that they agreed with the statement that yoga is mostly for women. So there's just this perception out there, and we have to accept that is the perception if we want to work with this population and address them in a way that really resonates with them and in a way that's approachable for them, and not being like, well, this is just what yoga is, like, take it or leave it. That's a very, like, I don't know. It doesn't seem very inviting, does it? Right?
No,
so like...
little dismissive, I think. Yes. In your research, did you also survey men from India? Because you would think with their culture that they might be a little more open to it.
Well, that's really the puzzle of this whole situation, right? Is that yoga in its birthplace, India, historically a male-dominated practice. And it's confusing why its origins would have such a big disjoint from what is apparently the case here and the perception here in the West. And I think you have to look at what happened to yoga when it came over to the United States in the Western Hemisphere. And this relates to a bigger conversation going on about how yoga is marketed and the overemphasis on asana practice. But the people who could go to yoga based on what was intelligent for companies to do and studios to do at that time was to market to the more privileged, like, women of society. And so there's never been a separation in the West of yoga and business, or yoga and celebrities, or yoga and marketing, right? So yoga has always been marketed to this subsect of women. And if you look at the covers of Yoga Journal, if you look at who the biggest yoga companies are marketed to, it's always women. And so the guys are just kind of left out of this whole process, thinking that this is what a yoga practitioner should look like. This is what a yoga practitioner should be able to do. I can't even touch my toes, so therefore I'm not a yogi. And therefore, if you practice yoga, you must want to be more feminine. And feminine is seen as weak and vulnerable and too touchy-feely, whereas a guy wants to walk into a studio knowing the exact benefit and function of the practice that he's getting. Like, men are just motivated by different things. So if we speak about yoga in such lofty terms and saying like, oh, this is how a yoga practitioner looks like, he's not going to resonate with that. He's going to say, ew, that's not me. I'm going to go lift weights at the gym and hang with my bros because that makes sense to him, right? And so I think there's a real opportunity here that we're just very much missing to reach out and offer the benefits of what is an extremely needed practice for guys, but in a way that just makes sense for them. And unfortunately, we're kind of demonizing the physical aspect of the practice with a lot of where the conversation is going in the community. But that physical aspect is what brings a lot of guys in the first place, because they start to feel stiff, they start to feel pains or aches, and they're like, all right, hate going to the doctor, but I'd rather go to a yoga class. If I had to choose one of the lesser evils. But no, this is like what it comes down to. They're motivated by pain, right? And so it's like, if I have to choose to go to the doctor, be dragged by my girlfriend to a yoga class, I'm going to go to the yoga class.
Yeah. Hey, any way we can get them in, right? I also, which I thought was an extremely exciting marketing technique, was that you have these little videos of people talking about your class and about your yoga therapy. And one was a guy who said, well, I had my friend who turned out to be a girl come with me the first time. And I thought that, kind of shows you that they aren't feeling really great comfortably to come to yoga, that they have to bring somebody, a female, with them. And the other guy
Usually,
said,
yes.
Yeah, okay. That's all right. And
Usually, yes. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think there's an important point to draw out here that you're making, because over half the men I surveyed in that research study I conducted said the same thing, which is that they were dragged to a class by a friend, and usually it was a girlfriend or somebody who they were romantically interested in. And so, I feel like the best place to try to get a date is just take somebody to a yoga class.
Oh, I had never thought of that. Okay.
If you think about it more, it's actually really smart, right? Because if you take a guy to a yoga class, you'll see if he's in his body. You'll see if he's aware of himself, of his emotions. You'll see how he responds to this feeling of being out of his comfort zone, right? And guys hate the feeling of being inadequate. They want to look like the big strong man, right? But in a yoga class, they're completely a fish out of water. And so they're like, I can't do that. I don't want to look stupid. And so this is boring.
Yeah, right. And I'm done.
And they've already lost interest. And then you've lost the opportunity to even get to the juicy spiritual stuff, because where they came into the practice was already so over their heads that you're like, wait, but this isn't even it yet. And they're like, I don't even care. I'm just done. Right. So, yeah. So it's just like, I think there's a natural interest there. I think a lot of guys are what I'm going to term yoga curious, but they're just too shy or don't know how to get over those more invisible obstacles that we don't really see necessarily or encounter as female practitioners. So,
yeah. Okay. So what do you do to help them through that initial barrier?
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of things you can do. And it's just a really good teacher, regardless of gender, is going to use a combination of skills and expertise and intuition and just people and communication skills to be able to meet that person where they're at. And so that's why I specialize in the therapeutics. That's why I want to study more massage and touch, because I believe our men are especially touch deprived. And so you have to just take slow steps and break things down into smaller progressions. But if you can show a guy that, hey, this uncomfortableness is just part of the process, this is step one of, many steps in this process. You can take that process as long as it's okay for you. But usually they don't have somebody to really break that down for them at a level and in a way that they can understand, and using language they understand. So a lot of the solution is about progressions, and a lot of the solution is about communication. So if a guy comes to me, actually, this is a perfect example. I have a client who's actually sent to me by one of my coaches, my mentors, and it's her husband. And she's a yoga teacher too, and she's been teaching for years and years, but she said she's always been trying to get her husband to do practice. He's a big sports player, he's a big hockey player, but he was just never interested in it. And she said she showed him some of my stuff, and he was instantly interested, because we were speaking his language, and we were saying, look, don't do the yoga practice just because you have to be a better person or something, because again, that tells him he's inadequate, and guys hate that feeling. We have to phrase it in a way of, this yoga practice is going to highly target developing your mobility so that you can stay injury-free in your hockey practice, so that you can keep improving in your athletic performance. Because otherwise, if you don't do that, it's not that you're going to wither and die or anything. It's just that you will begin to feel the body deteriorate at some point. And at that point, it's a little bit harder, or sometimes a lot harder, to then come back to this point where you were. So a lot of times it's about removing limitations or enabling them further. And so again, I very, very much emphasize functional benefits of the practice. What is the tangible outcome going to be of our work together? And so that speaks to how I run my business model too. I say, all right, based on our initial assessment, here's what I'm seeing in your body. This is what you told me is really important for you to be able to do. So I'm going to link those two things together. And so this yoga practice is not going to be the thing in your life, but it will be a central practice to enable you to do the things that are in your life, whether that's family or sports or your career or whatever it is. We can tailor that practice so that it's hitting all of the areas that you want and keeping you in balance, so you can do those things and not have to worry about it. And they're like, oh, that makes a lot more sense than practice because the practice is of itself the goal. It's too intangible for them. And then once they start to see those benefits and feel them for themselves in their body, this part is a really important part of it. Like, every guy I work with comes to this on his own time, and you can't force it. You really have to let him take this journey for himself. Like, I was working with an investment banker, multi-million dollar companies, just really high stress guy, would check his phone during sessions, just the whole 9 yards, right? So it took him 2 months of working with me privately to realize that his hips are connected to his back. And I saw this imbalance in his body like the first session, but it doesn't matter if I see it. He has to feel it. He has to think it's important. I don't care if I think he's doing better. He has to feel like he's doing better. And so that it really flips the paradigm of kind of how we're offering yoga right now, and being like, okay, this is your practice. You're the owner of it, but that also means you have to take responsibility for yourselves. And I think that challenge is what actually really excites them and motivates them, because they can see that tangible progress. Like, oh, you can lift your arm overhead 10 more degrees, or you don't have pain anymore when you go to press at the gym. Like, all of those things are, this whole culture of gains, they love that stuff. And any guy who's like a really driven or successful person is going to carry that same mentality in his practice usually. So we can allow yoga for him to be a space to soften, but still celebrate these like naturally masculine qualities, but just slightly redirected, right? And then after a while, they just naturally start to learn how to back off, how to have better body awareness. And then from that place of developing sensory awareness, become more connected with their emotional bodies. They become more connected with their energies. They'll come to me and say, oh, I felt this weird thing, or I was just really kind of down this week. Is there something we can do about that? I've heard stories of bachelor parties. I've heard stories of, and then the walls start coming down, and then you start to realize that, oh my God, these poor guys have nowhere to talk about this stuff, because you can't talk about it with your bros. You can't take it home to your wife or your girlfriend or whatever. You can't, you can work it out at the gym, but that's not necessarily what you need. You can't take it out at work because there's certain expectations you have to meet there. And so it's like, where do they have a place to put this stuff down? And it's like, oh, yoga, this makes sense, but in a way that is meaningful to them. Does that make sense? I know those really
No, it did. No, I think that was great. I really do. I noticed in those little videos that the guys would say, well, I came to a class, and then like 3 or 4 or 5 months later, I decided to become a yoga therapy client. So obviously it takes them a while to absorb what's happened and then feel the benefits. And I can understand that, because I've noticed that some guys, we'll just say some, aren't really very much in touch with their bodies and what happens. And so I think that's a really good segue into touch, because you wanted to talk about that. So let's explore that a little bit in this context. You've decided to become a massage therapist to add to your skill set, was what I understood you to say. And why did you decide to do this, especially as you have a large male clientele?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I'll answer another immediate criticism I get, which is that you're, a young, cute, attractive, whatever, female. You're doing this just to like take advantage of men with your sexuality. And it's just like, I know you're not saying that, but like that is literally what people have come at me with. And I'm not coming from that approach. My approach is very much that touch it's very controversial right now because of all of the sexual harassment and allegations. And a lot of men, I think, are very nervous about the aspect of touch. The way I want to use touch in my practice is as a very powerful healing tool. And as a female who is very embodied and very aware of and comfortable in my own sexuality, I think it's important to, again, hold space for men to approach this journey in the same way that I would approach or hold space for mine. And they have these same questions about intimacy and touch, but just what I think what feels frustrating from what I've heard from my male clients is that they don't know how to ask the right questions. They don't know how to ask for touch. They don't know how to receive touch, how to give touch, what's considered like creepy or not creepy, like depending on the situation. It's just there's a lot of fear around it. And there's so many layers of shame around touch too. So within the massage therapy realm and within the yoga realm, as these men are coming to a deeper connection with their bodies, it's natural that their relationship to touch would be a part of that evolving journey. So for that reason, I think it's an inseparable aspect of treating somebody therapeutically. So it could be as simple as somebody's coming in for, I don't know, upper cross syndrome, just very common spinal disorder, right? And he's doing really great with his yoga exercises. He's doing all his compliance or whatever, but I need to go in and do some soft tissue work on the pecs to open up the front of the shoulder and release the tension in there that's contributing to the rounding of the shoulders. Right. That's at a very basic level. At a more intangible level, say he's coming out of a breakup or bad relationship, or there's been a big block in his relationships for a long time, and so maybe that's contributing to his busyness at work, and he's like doing that to try to avoid intimacy and all of that. I see that as a glaring imbalance in somebody's life. The ability to connect meaningfully with another person can often be limited by someone's discomfort with touch and intimacy too. And so the way I navigate that in my client relationships is, of course, always professional, but over time, it's just soft little touches, little adjustments here, a support on their spine there, so they can deepen into the pose in a way that they can't access on their own, oftentimes because their body's just too big, or they don't have the awareness yet to be able to access that themselves. And I find that touch a lot of times is the thing that can bridge that gap the most efficiently and the most quickly without being intrusive. So you have to approach it in a very mindful way, but when applied with skill, intelligence, appropriateness, and clear intention, I think touch can be one of the most overlooked healing aspects for men. So it's not just, hey, go get a massage. It's, hey, what is your relationship to consent? What is your relationship to boundaries? Are you able to be responsive to boundaries? Are you able to communicate to me, oh, that feels good. Could I have a little bit more depth there? Or, can we back off a little bit? So that's part of the process of learning to work with another individual and to communicate your level of comfort around boundaries. And I think that in itself for men is very, very therapeutic, because they can become more confident in applying those skills to their relationships, and especially their intimate relationships too. Yeah, because if you're going to be touching somebody else's body, it's like you want to know that they're also in tune with themselves and their own bodies, right? It just makes so much sense to me. So I'm just like, why wouldn't we talk about this? Are we going to do it on day one? Probably not. I need to make sure that I establish rapport and trust and boundaries with him. Over the relationship, yeah, I would say it's a really, really important part of what I do and what I offer. And I'm proud to offer it, because my clients give me feedback that oftentimes that's the most, or one of the most valuable aspects of what we do, because they're like, I couldn't have felt that or made that change otherwise. So
yeah. No, I think that's true. I think, I am I teach older students, so I tend to have I don't do very much touch, but when I do, I just use a fingertip and often just say, now, can you feel that there? Can you stretch that more there? It just really focuses their mind on where they are having a little difficulty. And so, yeah, I think it can be very valuable as long as it's done well. I thought that you also have, I don't remember where I picked this up, your website or Facebook or someplace, about a guy who said he sounded like a very high level, businessman, and he had been in the military and he had PTSD. And he said he was very, very grateful to you that you asked first before touching him, because that was a trigger apparently for him. So you are also paying attention to, the trauma aspects, possible trauma aspects of touch too.
Oh, I mean, I almost go in assuming that people have trauma around touch these days. And that's kind of how I approach all of my clients, especially if they're coming to see me for therapeutic purposes. Because even though you have the intake, even though you have the interview, you still don't know that person yet. And so you might not reveal everything. And I don't think it's coming from a place of being dishonest. But again, in society overall, men especially are not, quote unquote, allowed to have feelings.
Yeah.
So even admitting something like that in the sacred space of a, therapist-client relationship can also take time. Or a lot of times these things don't come out until we're already there in the session. And it's just like, I was intuitively drawn to that aspect of his body because maybe that's where I felt that he needed some release. And then that release was associated with his PTSD. But there's no way I could know that going in initially. Right. So it's like, you always ask permission. The therapist embodies proper consent. And by doing that, teaching them what that means too, right? So it's like, if I approach you with such great honor and respect that, hey, from lesson to lesson, is it okay if I touch your body? Has anything changed? How are you feeling today? If somebody's like not feeling it at all, okay, cool. We'll do a really physical practice and you can do a bunch of the adjustments yourself. Boundaries are fluid. They're not like you put up a wall and that's it.
Yeah.
And it's just made of concrete and it's not this like porous chamber where you're always like leaking energy and there's no like structure around this exchange. So for me as a therapist, I set up that structure for them. I hold the container for them. And it's up to them to move through that to the extent that they want to. So, say, for example, I'm holding somebody in an adjustment. Like a lot of guys, for example, have very much difficulty in like wide-legged forward fold, just for example, right? So, their knees go up, the back rounds over, they're hunched.
Yes.
They're dumping everything into their low back because their hips are really tight. Their hamstrings are tight. They came to me for a low back issue or low back pain. And I'm like, you really have a hamstring? You know the story, right?
I do, yes. Very familiar, yes.
Very familiar, right? So this is such a classic moment where I'll just come up behind them and I'll place my foot by their right under their hips, so my shin bone is pressing up against the side of their back a little bit, so just to the side of the spine, to help give them a little bit of support. And I'll say, inhale, lengthen the spine. So I'll just place my hands right at the hip crease, of course at a comfortable distance from their inner thigh, and just say, okay, now as you inhale and lengthen up, and you can push back into my shin if you need support, but lengthen up. Okay, and then as you do that, relax the knees down away from my hands. So I'm not forcing them. I'm not telling them what they should be doing. I'm saying, as much as you can invite the knees to release, soften. And the hand is there to give them something to soften away from. Does that make sense? And so they're controlling the experience, and I'm just kind of providing the container. With my touch. Does that make sense? So
no, it does.
Specific way to go about it.
Yeah. I used to have a teacher that would put her feet against your back, your lower back, as you went forward. And that, I don't know, somehow that worked. It made it, I don't know, I guess it just gave you a place to lengthen and a place to soften. And it was quite effective, I thought. So I do know what you're talking about. You've kind of gone into how you attract men as clients for your yoga therapy and how you present the benefits, because it's different for men. What would you say is, do you think that you've pretty well covered the difference in teaching men or giving them yoga therapy practices, or is there anything else that you'd like to add to that? Because I thought that was really fascinating, that they really have a very different view of how they want to
be taught.
Yeah. I kind of got that impression. Yeah.
I like to give, for me, it's always an opt-in process. I very much have to be firm in myself about what it is that I'm offering. And so I I think men are very open and appreciative of directness instead of fluffy language. And so if somebody's coming to see me, I'll say, here's what you're coming to me for. Here's what I'm actually seeing. I'm going to give you straight expectations that you may not realize the journey that you're signing up for, but here's the underlying issues and here's the step-by-step process you can take to, address those underlying issues. And that, again, is not about addressing men. That's just about good therapy, so to speak. So I think the more that yoga practitioners and teachers can put things into very direct, clear terms using evidence-based principles, because we as yoga teachers have, yes, these thousands and thousands of years of tradition to draw from, but we also have access to the same sports science and rehab science and research that everybody else does. It's, I think, almost irresponsible of us to neglect that side of things for purely the sake of tradition. And so I think ultimately by offering yoga that's more adapted to the men and making it about functional mobility rather than I need to go to a yoga class just to have a heated stretch workout is going to drive a very clear distinction in the value of what yoga can provide to them, and then also the place that it could have in their lives, because ultimately that's what we want, is more people more connected to their bodies and their minds so that they can handle the stresses of life earlier, not take it out in a way that's has a negative impact on themselves and their others, whether they're aware of it or not. So I think just in conclusion, there's so much we could cover in this field, but the best, again, I'm just going to keep it simple. Like the best way to get a guy started who's like a little averse to yoga is just like take him on a yoga date or something. Keep it simple, keep it casual. Don't overly pressure him into anything. Like let him come to it. And like if he finds just one moment of like, oh my God, that was so cool. Like my hip released a little bit in a way I haven't felt in a long time. Keep him on those like small little successes. And then eventually it will become his own practice. Because what I found by interviewing dozens and dozens of senior yoga teachers who are men, there comes a point where yoga is part of their lives for the rest of their lives. It's just a really central driving force, regardless of whether they end up teaching or not. That point usually comes about after a year or two of practice. So if we can provide as an industry more options that are more accessible to these guys, we could potentially have a lot more really senior, like awesome, badass lifetime teachers who are really in it for the long term. It's like, it's kind of polarized for guys. Like women will come in and out of the yoga practice a lot, but for guys, it's like a very consistent thing once they get over that hump. So I feel like, my role here is just to provide, again, the container, the resources, the content, the living examples of other people who are making this possible and saying like, hey, this can be the new norm. It doesn't have to be always, the super bendy, like white, skinny girl.
Yes,
Even though I agree with that. Even though that's me. That's how I was born. I can't change it. But I hear you. I see you guys. I feel your pain, and it can totally be done better. I definitely hear you.
Okay. All right. That's great. I appreciate that. Okay. We're almost at the end here, and I want to give you contact details, but is there anything you would like to add for a couple of minutes?
Oh, for sure. So today, it's a really big day for me. I'm super excited. I just launched my Start Your Home Yoga Practice course. So the biggest tool I can offer somebody is developing a home yoga practice, and that is the main tool through which I teach yoga therapy. So I'll teach my clients exercises or meditations or breath work, and then they go home and they practice it. Because again, ultimately, this is your practice. It's not my practice. I'm just here to guide you. Start Your Home Yoga Practice is not about telling you what to practice. It's telling you how to frame a home yoga practice in a flexible, structured, and personalized way so that you can then have the intelligence and the awareness and the education to be able to create your own practice. So regardless of whether you're a super athletic guy or, an elderly student who just needs a little bit of like chair yoga or whatever, this course is available for everybody, but it's just helping people to overcome those first few steps of, I've heard yoga is good for me. I've always wanted to try it. I have no idea where to get started, and I don't think classes are necessarily going to be the best thing for me. So,
Okay.
So that's on my website now, missykai.yoga/courses. And then there will be some more details there.
Okay.
And so that's my biggest
Well, that's exciting.
new offering. Yeah.
That's great. And I just want to clarify that, because it is missykai.yoga, or is it missykaiyoga.com?
Well, either one is fine. The real website is missykai.yoga, but if you enter in .com by accident, you'll get rerouted, so no worries.
Okay, all right, that's good, because what I have here has .com on it. I just wanted to make sure we had the right thing.
That's my old one.
Okay. All of Facebook, Skype, Instagram, all of that is Missy Kai Yoga. Yeah, and it's all one word, and it's Kai is K-I-K-A-I, just so that you know how to spell that. So if you want to talk to Missy or see what she's been doing, or look at her new online course for generating your new home practice, then you can go to missykaiyoga. And Missy, I want to really thank you. I think you've given some really wonderful tips, and you really obviously know your stuff here about how to get men into yoga and find the kinds of things that are important to them. And that, of course, is what yoga is to be there for whoever needs it. So, so thank you so much. And I really appreciate you taking the time to come on.
Yeah, Stephanie, thank you so much as well, too. I really appreciate you holding a space for this topic. I know it's a bit new for the industry, and I'm just always so grateful for, anyone who's willing to dedicate their platform or their audience to help share this message. And I so believe in it, because obviously this affects half the population. So.
Yes.
And then I wanted to extend this offer to you and any of your listeners as well, just like, as the last, if you have a specific ailment or injury or condition or something you want to ask me about, and not just go to an online course to get personalized advice, that will be on my website too. I offer free 30-minute mobility assessments, whether in person or online. So you can just come in. I'm happy to give you guys the rundown on okay, here's what I'm seeing in your body, and what you could then focus on in your home yoga practice if you'd like, though.
Terrific. That's great. Thank you.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Stephanie. I really, really appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you for that wonderful interview. If you would like to be a guest on Changing the Face of Yoga, please go to my website, www.yogalightness.com.au, and under the Changing the Face of Yoga tab, you can complete Be Our Guest form. After reviewing the form and finding it applicable to this podcast, we will send you a link to schedule an interview. Please download, review, and tell your friends of any podcasts that are of interest to you and to them. If you would like to contact me, send an email to info@yogalightness.com.au. And thank you for listening to Changing the Face of Yoga.